Many blessings. My name is Dr. Cesar, and it's such an honor to be here with you. We've got a special Homies Empowerment, Ethnic Studies, Community Story Time and Lesson, and today we have a really powerful story. The book is called The Story of Ruby Bridges by Dr. Robert Coles, illustrated by George Ford. Before we start, a lot of you know pieces of this story, or most of you do. Right now, we're at a time where we're being asked to close schools, to have kids and students stay home, and that's been really difficult. And it's asked us to think about online learning. When Ruby was going to school, she was the only one going to school because not only was the racism so prevalent, but these white families felt like they wanted nothing to do with Ruby Bridges or African Americans, and so they made a choice not to go to school for almost a year. And Ruby faced so many hardships, but she always found a way to go on, and she was a tiny little kid, a 6-year-old. That's the power of you. That's the power of your ancestors. That's the power of 6-year-olds. Let's get into this story. It begins with such a beautiful dedication, actually, from Ruby Bridges' mother. And it reads, "Our Ruby taught us all a lot. She became someone who helped change our country. She was part of history. Just like generals and presidents are part of history, they're leaders, and so was Ruby. She led us away from hate, and she led us nearer to knowing each other, the white folks and the black folks and folks of every hue." Ruby's mother. Let's get started. Here we see an illustration of a young Ruby. Ruby Bridges was born in a small cabin near Tylerton, Mississippi. "We were very, very poor. I mean very, very poor," Ruby said. "My daddy worked picking crops. We just barely got by. There were times when we didn't have much to eat. The people who owned the land were bringing in machines to pick the crops, so my daddy lost his job, and that's when we had to move. I remember us leaving. I was 4, I think. Imagine you're 4, and all of a sudden, one of your parents loses their job, and now you have to leave and move from everything that you know. A lot of you know what that's like, and so you could relate with Ruby. At this time, she was just a little one." Take a look at this beautiful illustration. In 1957, the family moved to New Orleans. Ruby's father became a janitor. Her mother took care of the children during the day. After they were tucked in bed, Ruby's mother went to work scrubbing floors in a bank. Imagine that. So the kids are going to go to sleep, and now mom has to work all night. She's been working all day, taking care of the family, cooking, cleaning, making sure the kids are all right. And now, in the middle of the night, she's going to go clean a bank. That's intense. That's powerful. Every Sunday, the family went to church. "We wanted our children to be near God's Spirit," Ruby's mother said. "We wanted them to start feeling close to Him from the very start." And I don't know if the parents knew this, but I'm sure they did, that they were setting a foundation for resistance, because what Ruby was learning in church is going to help her in this civil rights struggle to come. We shall see. Take a look at this image. This is an image in a courtroom where a major decision takes place in New Orleans that would change the course of history, and we will see what these change makers do. At that time, black children and white children went to separate schools in New Orleans. The black children were not able to receive the same education as the white children. It wasn't fair, and it was against the nation's law. In 1960, a judge ordered 4 black girls to go to 2 white elementary schools. 3 of the girls were sent to McDonough 19, That's the name of the school. 6-year-old Ruby Bridges was sent to first grade in the William France Elementary School. Here you see an image of the family coming together, coming to their source of strength. Ruby's parents were proud that their daughter had been chosen to take part in an important event in American history. They went to church. Why do you think they went to church after hearing the news that this was going to happen? We sat there and prayed to God, Ruby's mother said, that we'd all be strong and we'd have courage and we'd get through any trouble. And Ruby would be a good girl and she'd hold her head up high and be a credit to her own people and a credit to all the American people. We prayed long and we prayed hard. Why do you think they prayed? How is prayer a source of strength? This is her in that illustration on that first day of school. You see some field marshals. You see a lot of people picketing and protesting with signs that say whites only. People didn't want Ruby Bridges to go to their school. On Ruby's first day, a large crowd of angry white people gathered outside the France Elementary School. The people carried signs that said they didn't want black children in a white school. People called Ruby names. Some wanted to hurt her. The city and state police did not help Ruby. Listen, the city and state police did not help. The President of the United States ordered federal marshals to walk with Ruby into the school building. The marshals carried guns. Imagine how scary that was. You're 6 years old and you're excited about learning. You're excited about going to school. And all of these people are attacking you and calling you racist names, calling you bad names. What would you do? How would you protect yourself? You're 6. Imagine the courage of this little girl. It's the courage that you carry too. It's in your DNA. Take a look at this image. Every day for weeks that turned into months, Ruby experienced that kind of a school day. She walked to the France school surrounded by marshals, wearing a clean dress and a bow in her hair and carrying her lunch pail. Ruby walked slowly for the first few blocks. As Ruby approached the school, she saw a crowd of people marching up and down the street. Men and women and children shouted at her. They pushed toward her. The marshals kept them from Ruby by threatening to arrest them. Ruby would hurry through the crowd and not say a word. What kind of strength do you think it takes that they're calling you bad names and you don't call them back? They're saying negative things to you and you keep walking towards school, towards your learning. Now right now, many of us are not in school. So the question is, how will you keep marching towards your learning? Because believe it or not, Ruby Bridges fought for you to learn, for me to learn. So what are we going to do with this time at home? Take a look at this image. She's there all by herself. Now, if you notice really closely on the writings, my son Santiago, when he was little, crossed out the name of the teacher because he had heard that the teacher's name was different. And so he crossed that out. But I'm going to read the original text for now. But this is Ruby all by herself because no one wanted to go to school with her. The white people in the neighborhood would not send their children to school. When Ruby got inside the building, she was all alone except for her teacher, Mrs. Hurley. There were no other children to keep Ruby company, to play with and learn with, to eat lunch with. Imagine you're going to go to school all by yourself. And now some of you are facing a reality where you might be at home learning all by yourself. But every day, Ruby went into the classroom with a big smile on her face, ready to get down to the business of learning. I could learn a lot from a 6-year-old. How do I keep a smile every day, even if I'm alone at home? And how do I get excited about learning? She was polite and she worked well at her desk, Miss Hurley said. She enjoyed her time there. She didn't seem nervous or anxious or irritable or scared. She seemed as normal and relaxed as any child I've ever taught. So Ruby began learning how to read and write in an empty classroom, an empty building. But she was not empty at all. She was filled with spirit and hope and a willingness to learn. Oh, I got a lot to learn from Ruby. This is her teacher. I think she's learning from Ruby about her strength. Sometimes I'd look at her and wonder how she did it, said Miss Hurley. How she went by those mobs and sat here all by herself and yet seemed so relaxed and comfortable. Listen, there's racism outside, there's hatred outside, there's difficulty outside, there's a virus outside, and inside, Ruby's okay. Where does that come from? Miss Hurley would question Ruby in order to find out if the girl was really nervous and afraid, even though she seemed so calm and confident. But Ruby kept saying she was fine. The teacher decided to wait and see if Ruby would keep on being so relaxed and hopeful, or if she'd gradually begin to wear down, or even decide that she no longer wanted to go to school. Some people are thinking we're going to wear down in this crisis. Nah. Not at all. One day, this is her teacher kind of staring out the window, and she's going to learn such a powerful lesson from Ruby. Let's find out what that lesson is. Then one morning, something happened. Miss Hurley stood by a window in her classroom as she usually did, watching Ruby walk toward the school. Suddenly, Ruby stopped. Right in front of the mob of howling and screaming people, she stood there facing all those men and women. Ruby seemed to be talking to them. What do you think she's saying to them? This is that moment. Imagine so many adults are angry. And Ruby begins to say some things back. Let's see what happens. Miss Hurley saw Ruby's lips moving and wondered what Ruby could be saying. What do you think she was saying? The crowd seemed ready to kill her. Oh my. It's just unfathomable, which means unbelievable, that adults would want to hurt a 6-year-old child. That's what racism gets to. It's a sickness and a cancer. The marshals were frightened. They tried to persuade Ruby to move along. They tried to hurry her into the school, but Ruby wouldn't budge. Then Ruby stopped talking and walked into the school. Sometimes we as adults, we question children and we think we know what they're doing. And here comes her teacher trying to question Ruby. She thinks she knows what she did, but I don't think she has a clue. You students are amazing. When she went into the classroom, Miss Hurley asked her what happened. Miss Hurley told Ruby that she'd been watching and that she was surprised when Ruby stopped and talked with the people in the mob. Ruby became irritated. I didn't stop and talk with them, she said. Ruby, I saw you talking, Miss Hurley said. You know how adults get. They think they got it all figured out and they start yelling at us. I saw your lips moving. I wasn't talking, said Ruby. I was praying. I was praying for them. Every morning, Ruby had stopped a few blocks away from school to say a prayer for the people who hated her. This morning she forgot until she was already in the middle of the angry mob. She wasn't talking to the people. She was praying for the people who hate her. Imagine that. This is her medicine and her practice every day. When school was over for the day, Ruby hurried through the mob as usual. After she walked a few blocks and the crowd was behind her, Ruby said the prayer she repeated twice a day, before and after school. Please, God, try to forgive those people, because even if they say those bad things, they don't know what they're doing. So you could forgive them, just like you did those folks a long time ago when they said terrible things about you. That's 6-year-old Ruby. In a sense, the end. You know, Ruby went on to live a very successful life. She had kids, she was married, she started her own organization and foundation. But this is what she was doing when she was 6. And parents raised her in such a beautiful way, in giving thanks and in prayer. And I wonder what Ruby Bridges would want us to know about these times, about the difficulty of these times. What do you think the lessons are? I want to ask you to write to us at HomiesEmpowerment@gmail.com and tell us what you think Ruby's message for us would be. Now, if you decide to have Ruby write you a love letter, imagine it. Put Dear in your name. What would Ruby tell you about these times? About education, about prayer, about standing up for your rights, about believing in yourself. I can't wait to read what you have to say.